Hello, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Coach What Matters podcast, where we aim to bring you insightful discussions on the latest trends, strategies, and challenges in the world of business. I'm your host, Leslie Shimborski, coach and COO for Coach What Matters. Today's topic is the evolving landscape of project delivery in a digital technology company. I have with me my colleague and friend, Cesar Flores, enterprise coach and founder of Coach What Matters. And in case this is your first time joining us, Cesar has over 20 years of executive coaching and leadership experience across diverse industries. Welcome again, Cesar.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and excited about this topic.
Yeah, it's a good one. Let me just open by a little bit of a story. A couple weeks ago, I posted a video to share the benefits of operating a business with the Why Blueprint as your guide. And this is a Coach What Matters product. Soon after, a colleague of mine reached out and asked, "Hey, I listened to your video, Leslie, and it made me wonder, are you guys still agile?" And she was referring to a graphic and my explanation that when using the Why Blueprint, companies stand to gain an additional $100 million over the next 5 years. And the statement was made in conjunction with a graphic that showed 3 high-level operating strategies. They were process optimization, scaled agile methods, and the AI-augmented Why Blueprint designed by Coach What Matters. So as the Why Blueprint architect, how do you answer that question? Then the question being, hey, are you guys agile?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's an interesting question. And one of the things that, as I thought about like the blueprint is taking a step back from all the different things, my experience, successes, failures, and everything in between. And the real answer to that question is really, we are purpose and value driven over tactics, practices, and frameworks. So having said that, though, if we go back to the origins of Agile Scrum, we have to go back to the manifesto. We are deeply rooted in some of those principles that are there. There's 12 Agile principles and also the manifesto itself. The founders there were after making teams great. And their focus was on that, on teams. And the focus at that point in time was software teams. So, and those principles were aimed at that team level. And one of the things that happens over time is, there's always this transition that happens in any practice or tactic or framework. It has to go into different environments, into different company cultures, practices evolved, and also rituals evolved, and all kinds of things happen. Those things get interpreted. Those things get interpreted through those company cultures. They also find their own life within a company. And sometimes it leads to good places, and sometimes it leads to bad places. And over time, the Agile community has really debated a lot of these tactics, these practices that has happened. And over the years, really what we've seen through the evolution is the success rate of initiatives and projects and programs through these different tactics, whether it's Agile or Waterfall or anything else, Six Sigma, really not improve the overall success rate of, the initiatives or projects of these companies. If you do the research, you see that in the numbers, that over the last 30 years, there hasn't been much improvement. And why is that? Is it because these practices or frameworks have not evolved enough? Or is it something else? And that something else is what led me to thinking about the why blueprint. It is not just about the team level, making the teams better. And it's also not just about those practices and tactics. It's really about the organization as a whole and what purpose that organization has and what value does it want to deliver to the marketplace, and being focused on those things rather than being focused on a practice, a tactic, or a framework.
I see. So you're saying, yes, rooted in Agile, um, and that there are other tactics that may be also helpful to an organization in reaching some goals.
Absolutely. One of the things that is put out there, and a lot of research is also done with even transformations, the success of transformations. And depending on who's doing the study, it varies on the success of transformation, somewhere between 33% and 40%. So those transformations themselves are not a good gamble for businesses. But let's say you do have a successful transformation. What is that transformation doing for your business? Is it making your overall business better? Or is it making an area of the company better while sacrificing other areas or causing friction in other areas of the organization because of that transformation? So those are all the things that you have to consider when you're taking on an endeavor of going through a transformation. The other thing that happens in a transformation is you start, or whoever, depending on who you hire, whether it's a consultant, a partner, or somebody else, or you bring in that expertise yourself in house, is that person becomes the salesperson of that tactic, not really the salesperson of looking after your business. So they start selling Agile.
The selling of Agile, which has become a huge industry, billions of dollars.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So, this is something that I've studied in the last year plus, is how big this industry is. So Agile itself is somewhere between 1.7 billion and $2 billion worldwide, and growing, right? So this is a whole industry by itself. So when you talk to a consulting agency that rolls out Agile, they also bring in tools into your workplace, and they bring in a whole culture to your organization. Is your organization ready for that culture? And that in itself creates a lot of friction too. And sometimes there's animosity towards that new culture that is brought in, and that creates friction, right? So there's a lot of things that go on within the adoption, the success rate, but also does it truly improve the company? Um, and when you ask, and many leaders do ask the right questions, like, how do I know this is going to improve my company? And they usually, what they do is they introduce Agile metrics, right? What and the problem with that is you're measuring Agile. You are not measuring the success of your company because of Agile. You're measuring the success of how agile you are. Well, you could be the most agile company in the world and not make your business better. The assumption is that if you're the most agile company in the world, that your business will be better. And we have seen cases where that is not true. And there's nothing wrong with the practice and framework of scaled agile or Scrum, there's nothing wrong with that. And why I point to the principles and where we started this conversation with the principles and the manifesto itself, it's rooted in the right place. So there's nothing wrong with the practice itself and or the principles. What is wrong with it is how it gets interpreted into the workplace and into that company and how it evolves. So do remember that Agile is not a destination, right? It was never meant to be a place where you arrive at agility. It is supposed to be a journey, but who is guiding that journey? And that's the most important question. And that is where sometimes we go astray into selling agile and being more agile, but not really looking after the company's bottom line.
How does the Y blueprint approach overall performance improvement differently?
The answer to that question starts with a fundamental thought that could be controversial out there in the community, which is this: can a team overcome a bad executive decision? So, meaning, can a team truly overcome an initiative that was initiated by an executive and make it great? And the answer to that, it's extremely difficult to do that because the executive or the leader has a vision for that. And that vision tends to become dogma within the organization. And the teams, because they usually don't have the power of the budget, they are stuck with this initiative, right? To try and make it as successful as possible. So in the Y blueprint, what we did is turn the model upside down. And what I mean by that is really putting the foundation of the purpose and the core values and how we're going to measure the company's success truly where it belongs, which is at the leadership ranks. They have the power of the budget. How are they making decisions on that budget? And how are they measuring the success of those decisions that are being made? Do they have pivot points on those decisions that are being made? And that is translated over to the teams. And the same concept happens with the teams. They are making decisions that align to that purpose, to that focus. And they also have pivot points that they can point to. And this is transparent. And this is what makes the Y blueprint different, right? It starts with the executive leadership and their accountability to those teams. Right now, if you were not to use the Y blueprint, the executives, the leadership ranks are obsessed with output, with making teams feature factories and cranking out work. So if your velocity is X today, the question that is often brought up is, how do we make it Y, right? How do we get more with less, right? So this is the wrong discussion, right? So it starts always with the executive leadership team. Are they making the right decisions? And how do they know they are? Right? They need that information. They also need that transparency. The teams need that transparency as well, because they are where most of the action happens in companies. They produce a lot of the value and get firsthand feedback from customers and everybody they talk to when they're doing their reviews and everything else. And how is that making its way up to the leadership ranks? sometimes that information gets stuck somewhere in middle management. And this is also what the Y blueprint is preventing. We are making all that information transparent. How are decisions being made? Where are the pivot points? Where are the feedback loops? And we're making that visible to everybody in the whole company.
So let's talk about the teams. We see a lot of job postings in the IT world for project managers and scrum masters. And I think this is where there's a lot of philosophical discussions about better, faster delivery from scrum teams or Kanban teams, typically in agile businesses, or what we might describe as a more goal oriented and firmly scoped teams led by project managers. What are your thoughts on these roles and what you titled the enduring challenge of IT project success in an article that I read of yours?
One of the things that I really want to encourage the community to do, the Agile community, and by the way, I do consider myself an Agilist because I do strongly believe in the principles themselves. I sometimes question some of the tactics, but I am a strong believer in the principles. I want to encourage that if you have strong feelings about something, I want to encourage you to really lessen that a little bit and bring the temperature down. Um, because the world where we're going, and I'm also speaking to project managers as well. When I first started in project management, the Agile or Scrum was really very new. And I know I'm aging myself a little bit here. And then when I loved the principles when I heard them. I loved the manifesto when I heard them. And I quickly became a believer. And when when that was taking place, there was no such thing as certifications. There wasn't even a CSM. There wasn't anything like that. And then quickly, the organization started developing certifications. Now there's more certifications than ever. Whether you're doing project management, that or Prince or Six Sigma, and different layers of that, and then also Scrum. And if you do Safe or Less or any of these other ones, there are so many certifications. That does not mean all those certifications does not mean that you are a great Scrum Master, a great program manager, or a great project manager. What you need is the right skill sets, the right areas to apply this skill set. So what we did is we modeled the data, and this is more direct to your question. We modeled the data for the last 30 years. And for the last 30 years, even though we have evolved practices, frameworks have been introduced, we've learned a great deal about how to manage projects, how to introduce initiatives. We have ProSide with change management. Even with all those tools available, the best rates that we get is somewhere in the 50 percentile. So that means that it's a flip of a coin whether your initiative, program, or project is going to be truly successful. And by the way, that definition of success has changed as well over the 30 years. But then we modeled that and said, what is going to happen in the next 7 years, right? So through our models, we have modeled to see what would happen in the next 7 years with the introduction of AI and what is going to happen to these roles. And what it's pointing to is what you alluded to is this hybrid approach. Really, it's not about being a strict agile or a strict project manager. It is about a hybrid approach. So what does this mean for these communities? And what does it mean for hiring managers as a whole? Does that mean that you have to hire a scrum master who's also a project manager? Do you, as a hiring manager, understand what that means? And and those questions really need to be internalized with the companies that are doing the hiring. But really, what the data shows is that we're not talking about a hybrid where you combine Agile with project manager and make them project Agile or something like that. What it's really pointing to is using the right tool for the right project for the right team, right? So, and it's funny. One of the first things that I needed to do in the last years is learn how to make pancakes. And I looked and because I was new to doing that, I picked the exact tool that would make pancakes. Of course, you can make pancakes with different types of tools. But for me, what is the best and easiest way to execute that task? It is to have a dedicated tool to be able to do that, to make pancakes, right? And then I could diversify into other things if I need to. But that is what the hybrid model is pointing to, is that if you have a certain initiative that requires a high level of adaptability, then you choose the right tool for that, which is an agile type style. But if you have an initiative that requires a strict guideline, compliance, legal, and you pick a different style. And what the program managers and Agile have to do is really have a wide skill set to be able to change hats between these two roles. What we don't understand, or what hiring managers often don't understand, is that when they're hiring somebody, really they're trying to mesh the two today. They're trying to mesh these two roles somehow. And what is not understood is that these two roles, the principles and the practices and tactics, sometimes cause friction between the two. And what they're truly trying to do is say, I want a fixed date, but I want to be able to change scope and not change the date, the due date. And this is a problem. They want to be able to introduce scope and not change the due date. And this is a friction point, not only for the person organizing, coordinating, and trying to rally the team, but also for the teams. So they end up spending countless hours trying to satisfy both and creating friction within the organization and also low morale within the company. So they need to understand that when we say hybrid, we mean pick the right tool for the right job.
And I'm hearing you say that doesn't mean that within a company you can't have this team operating in Scrum and this team operating in a project management style. They have two different needs, and that's okay. And if you're going to change rules, you have to let everybody know that the rules have changed. Otherwise, you get this friction that you were talking about.
Exactly right. So what leaders have to do is really focus on that. If you're a project manager, program manager, scrum master, RTE, release train engineer, or any of these, you need to focus on adaptability and not on dogma. You need to focus on your wide skill set rather than a particular lane. If you're a leader in an organization, you need to recognize that this is coming. You need to refine and internalize these career paths for these folks, right? And you need to invest more in a strategic PMO rather than a traditional PMO. And you really need to invest in these strategic power skills, because what AI is going to do is it's going to replace this administrative work that these folks do. So you really need to empower these people more in the strategic approach to things and adaptability and understand when they need to apply the right kind of tool.
So you're saying the PMO of the future is going to look a little different.
Absolutely. Not only is it going to look different, we're not going to recognize it because what's coming is also the gig economy, right? Where you're going to flex your workforce depending on the needs. So your core strategic PMO will be smaller, but it will flex with your investment. And that flex that is required needs a core that is foundational, adaptable, and different than what we have today.
So that's really powerful and transformative advice for hiring managers and organizational leaders across disciplines. Um, the other almost controversial point that I read in your article is that the blurring of lines in the tactics used. You mentioned the blurring of roles isn't confusion always. It can be a sign of organizational maturity, moving from doing agile to being agile. And so, if I'm listening to this podcast and my title is Scrum Master or Project Manager or even Product Owner, can kind of sometimes, as I see the playing field get kind of mixed in with this project management. Um, what does this blending of roles? What does that mean for me as the Scrum Master or Project Manager listening, and for the skills that I've developed in project management or Scrum? What does this changing environment mean for me, and what is your advice for me as we move into the next phase of project management?
What folks need to do in these roles that we've been talking about, whether you're a Scrum Master or a release train engineer or a coach or a project manager or program manager, anywhere in that family, you need to think about the skill sets that you have today and what are the skills of tomorrow look like in the next 7 years, and what do you need to put in your toolbox that you do not have today. And by the way, I don't mean just more certifications, right? Because to me, certifications just means that you sometimes can pass a test, but that doesn't mean that you can apply these skills.
Right.
And the application of skills and strategy of these skills is what I'm calling power skills. And not necessarily whether you can run a daily stand up or a retro or any kind of meeting, right? And you can take meeting minutes and things like that. I am talking about how do you enable the team to deliver value in different type of approaches. So you have to be strategic about that thinking in how you do that and create a high performing environment, whether you're running a traditional project or whether you're running an agile type of project. Apply the right approach to the right problem. Focus, focus on that value delivery that the intention of leadership was, right? And apply it to that. Critical thinking is a big part of that. The empowering the teams is a huge part of that. Being transparent, providing the data of that is critically important. But also the feedback back to leadership on those pivot points is critical. So that requires that those power skills that AI will not bring to the table in the next 7 years, right? No matter what happens in the next 7 years, AI cannot replace the human critical thinking aspect of it. And that is what the data shows through the modeling that we've done, whether it's Claude, whether it's ChatGPT, DeepSeek, or any of these other models. When we looked at their papers and we looked at their roadmaps and we applied them to our model, and we also fed the data in for the last 30 years and what is going to happen next in the next 7 years, that is what the model shows, is that critical thinking is still going to be in the strategy of it is still going to be the number one thing that where we need that human factor, those power skills that need to come in. So really think critically about what's in your skill set today and what do you need for the next 7 years.
Yeah, what's kind of interesting about your the work you're referring to is that we haven't seen that one technique over another has been more successful. Um, and you've got some information about that definition of success. You referred to it earlier. How how do we get from a flip of a coin, as you referred to it earlier, to success? Like more than not. Do you have ideas on that?
Absolutely. One of the things that the analogies that we always use, as long as I can remember, is people, rowing the boat in the same direction. And no matter how many times that analogy has been used in my career, spanning almost 25 years, um, I have never seen an organization row in the same direction, right? So that is what we need to do. And whether you use our blueprint or not, can everybody in the organization answer that question for you, right? And who are the people that are keeping that drumbeat to row in the right direction? And those folks are the leadership team. The burden of that drumbeat for the organization, of that purpose, the direction, the pivots, all of those things, the burden of that is on leadership. The team's burden is to drive the action necessary to fulfill that purpose and deliver value, right? Those are the two different burdens that must be met in an organization. And it doesn't matter to me if you use our blueprint or not, right? You have to address that internally in a way. Tactics may improve rowing for an individual or two individuals, but it will not provide them direction, right? So they can be rowing as quickly as possible, but be rowing in the wrong direction. And this is why I started with that what I consider to be a very, very powerful statement, which is this: we as Coach What Matters are purpose and value driven over tactics, practices, and frameworks. Yes, we value those tactics, we value practices, but we do not value them more than we do purpose and value, right? Because to my analogy, yes, you can make a team row faster, but they could be rowing in the wrong direction. And this is extremely important for folks to understand. For the last 30 years, every project initiative that has failed because there wasn't enough engagement for leadership. Somewhere in the top 10, there is that leadership engagement, and the definition of that is in there. We've modeled it. The proof is in the data, right? So that's what we did at Coach What Matters, is we put the burden on leadership to drive purpose and value and define it so that the teams can do that as effectively as possible.
Well said. Well said. I think that is a great place to stop. And so thank you for your willingness to share your insights. It's always appreciated. So, listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you found our episode 4 insightful. We certainly enjoyed sharing thoughts with you. Check out our website, www.coachwhatmatters.com, where you can find our blog, previous podcasts, episodes, and reach out to us to request a consultation. We're also social. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. So like and follow us to always see what's new. Until next time, remember to engage with what matters the most.